The Grand Council chamber floated above the capital world of Varnes, wrapped in silver light and arrogance. Its walls were alive with shifting colors, showing the flags and emblems of 100 proud species. The air was too clean, too calm, like the world had never known dirt, blood, or fear. In the center of the room stood Ambassador James Hayes, humanity's last voice in a galaxy that had already decided his people's fate. He looked small among the towering alien delegates, scaled giants, crystal-bodied scholars, winged beings that shimmered like fire. Every pair of eyes was fixed on him, filled with disdain, curiosity, or cold amusement. Chains of energy bound his wrists, glowing faintly blue. The guards on either side of him, a pair of reptilian warriors, kept their hands on their weapons, as if they expected him to lunge at the galaxy's most powerful council barehanded. He wouldn't, not yet. At the far end of the chamber, seated on a throne of living stone, was the High Chancellor, a creature of glimmering crystal plates and deep violet light pulsing under its skin. Its voice, when it spoke, was calm and cold. "Humanity of Saul," it began, "you stand before the Council of the Union, charged with defiance against galactic law. You resisted lawful subjugation. You struck at Union fleets. You refused integration into peaceful order." Its tone sharpened. "You are a violent, primitive species. You bring chaos wherever you go." 1,000 murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some of the alien representatives nodded, others smiled thinly. Hayes stood silent. He had been a soldier once, before the title of ambassador meant anything. He had seen what the Council's peaceful order looked like: cities turned to glass, oceans poisoned, children starving under alien rule. He had seen what the galaxy did to those who refused to kneel. He took a slow breath and raised his head. "Peaceful order," he said quietly. "That's what you call invasion." A hiss ran through the crowd. The guards tightened their grip. "You killed billions," Hayes continued, voice calm but shaking slightly at the edges. "You bombed our cities from orbit. You called it pacification. You took our people as slaves and told yourselves it was for their own good." The Chancellor's light flickered in irritation. "You are speaking out of turn." Hayes looked up at the council chamber, those grand, towering figures who thought they were gods. "You call us primitive because we fight back. You think we're beasts because we don't obey. But we remember every world you burned, every child who screamed while you called it diplomacy." The room filled with noise, shouts, roars, metallic echoes. Some called for silence. Others demanded his execution. But the Chancellor only raised a crystalline hand. The room went still. "Humanity has always been a violent anomaly," it said. "Your kind has fought itself for millennia. When first contact was made, we hoped to uplift you, to teach you peace. Instead, you turned your weapons on your benefactors. You are unfit to stand among civilized life." Hayes laughed softly. It wasn't a joyful laugh, it was broken, bitter. "Peace," he said. "You came to Earth with warships. You came with demands. You called yourselves teachers, but you spoke like conquerors." He met the Chancellor's cold, violet gaze. "You wanted obedience. You got resistance." The Chancellor leaned forward, light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Resistance? You call what you did resistance. You unleashed nuclear fire on your own soil rather than surrender. You burned your atmosphere to wound us." "We did," Hayes said, voice steady now, "because we knew what you were." The Chancellor tilted its crystalline head. "And what are we, human?" Hayes smiled faintly. "Predators just like us." That single word, predators, spread through the chamber like fire. Alien ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. Some hissed, others looked away. The Chancellor's glow dimmed, the chamber growing cold. "Enough," it said. "Your species is hereby sentenced to containment. Earth will remain under Union control. All off-world colonies will be stripped of weapons and technology. The human fleet will be dismantled. The Sol system will be quarantined for the safety of the galaxy." It paused, letting the words echo. Your kind will live, but you will not rise again. For a moment, silence held the room. Then Hayes spoke, voice quiet, carrying across the hall like a blade slicing through fog. You think this ends it? The Chancellor blinked. What did you say? Hayes straightened, his chains humming. You think you've won. You think you've broken us because our ships are gone and our cities are ash. But you've never fought a human who has nothing left to lose. The guards moved closer, but Hayes didn't stop. His voice rose, not in anger but in grim pride. We are not finished. You can burn our skis. You can silence our worlds, but you cannot kill what we are. You can't cage the hunger, the will, the need to survive. He leaned forward, eyes burning with quiet fury. You call us animals, fine, but you've cornered the wrong animal. The Chancellor's glow flickered uncertainly. For the first time, something like unease moved through the room. Hayes smiled, a small, weary smile, sharp as a knife's edge. You'll see it soon enough, he said. You'll see what happens when the last light in the dark refuses to go out. The guard seized him, forcing him to the ground. Energy bolts struck his back, pain lancing through his body. He didn't scream. As they dragged him away, Hayes lifted his head one last time, voice rough but clear. Remember this day, he rasped, the day you thought you'd tamed humanity. He smiled through blood and pain, because the hunt hasn't even begun. The stars over Saul had gone quiet. No signal, no trade, no cries for help, just silence. For the first time in centuries, the Union's vast communication grid showed nothing from Earth. The network that once buzzed with human noise, music, laughter, chaos, was now a dead channel. The aliens thought it was over. They thought humanity had finally gone still. They were wrong. The silence was not peace, it was a warning. The Council's intelligence reports arrived in thin digital trickles, each one more confusing than the last. Patrol fleets sent to monitor Earth vanished without a trace. Outposts near Mars stopped responding. Automated mining drones around the asteroid belt reported strange movements before going dark. At first, the Union said it was just system failure, glitches, sabotage by the last human rebels hiding in caves, but deep down, a whisper spread among the outer colonies. They're out there, the humans are hunting again. The Council denied it, of course. They laughed in their shining halls. Humans cannot threaten us, said the Chancellor. They have no ships, no weapons, they are broken. But in the dark corners of the galaxy, soldiers whispered another truth. They had fought humans, they had seen them fight. And they knew that nothing is more dangerous than a wounded species with something to avenge. One night cycle later, the first real sign appeared. A Union patrol ship, Valora's Edge, was sent to inspect the ruins of a destroyed human shipyard orbiting Titan. The crew expected wreckage. What they found instead was a trap. When the Valora's Edge reached orbit, the station looked empty. Lights flickered weakly. The airlocks were open. No life readings. The captain, a scaled, four-eyed Varan named Kether, ordered a boarding team. Scan for weapons, he said, his voice calm but cautious. Negative readings, replied the sensor officer. Only traces of human DNA. The boarding party entered the station, armor gleaming under cold lights. They found silence. No bodies, no blood, no sound but the hum of broken machines. Then on a wall near the central corridor, they saw it. A message, carved deep into the metal with something sharp. You started the hunt, we're finishing it. The transmission ended there. The patrol never returned. The next day, only static came through, followed by a faint sound, the beating of a heart. Slow human. Panic spread through the lower branches of the Union military. Reports multiplied. A fleet of drones missing near Jupiter's orbit. A convoy of supply ships found adrift, their crews gone but no damage done. A scout vessel near the Kuiper belt, broadcasting a single phrase in the human tongue. Run! Still, the council called it nonsense. Fear exaggerates, they said. Humans cannot do this. But every general knew something the politicians didn't. Humans were not like the others. When other species lost wars, they surrendered. When humans lost, they adapted. They learned, they turned defeat into fuel. Inside the council's private chambers, tension grew. Ambassador Hayes, still their prisoner, sat alone in a cold metal cell under the council spire. He wasn't fed well, but he didn't care. He was waiting, listening. He knew the silence, he recognized it. Humanity had gone dark before, when ancient wars burned continents, when empires fell, when survival demanded quiet. It wasn't surrender, it was focus. The calm before the storm. When the guards came to feed him, Hayes smiled faintly. "You should get ready," he said. The guard blinked. "For what?" Hayes looked at him with tired, knowing eyes. "For the sound that comes after silence." Days passed, then weeks. The council grew nervous. Fleets were moved closer to Saul. Surveillance satellites were rebuilt. They found nothing. But data analysts noticed something strange. Every time they scanned Earth, the signals bounced back distorted. Not random noise, patterns. At first, it looked like static, but then one scientist realized the distortion had rhythm. Heartbeat rhythm. And behind it, faint whispers, words in human languages, old ones. "We're still here. Keep watching." Every hunter leaves tracks. The technician who found it quit the next day, trembling. The report was buried. The council didn't want to believe it. One evening, during a routine session, the High Chancellor addressed the assembly. "These ghost stories are distractions," it said. "The humans are beaten. The silence around their world is proof of their defeat. The reports are lies born of fear." The chamber nodded, murmuring agreement. But as the Chancellor spoke, a shadow fell across the glass ceiling above. The chamber's lights flickered. The planetary sensors registered a small object entering orbit, too small to be a ship. It was a satellite. Before the guards could react, it began broadcasting on every frequency. Old human music, deep, heavy drums and low singing voices echoed through the chamber. Then, across every holographic screen, a message appeared in simple white letters. "The hunters are awake." That night, the council convened an emergency meeting. Scouts were dispatched to every sector of the Sol system. Armadas surrounded Earth's orbit. They found wrecks, empty, twisted Union ships gutted clean, not a single human life form detected. But every hull bore a mark burned into its metal, 3 claw-like slashes, each ending in a crude symbol that no alien translator could understand. It was human, a mark of vengeance. Far away in the dark between stars, something moved. Hidden fleets, built from stolen wrecks and forgotten technology, came alive. Human voices whispered through encrypted channels. No music, no laughter, no panic, just purpose. The silence was ending. Humanity had gone dark not because it was defeated, but because it was becoming something else. The galaxy had mistaken stillness for death. But silence for humans was never death. It was the breath before the roar. The first real spark came in the cold shadow of Saturn. Titan Station had been silent for 43 hours. At first, the Union command dismissed it. "Minor malfunction," they said. "Human sabotage is impossible. The sector is under full control." But when silence stretched into days, they sent a patrol ship to investigate. A sleek vessel of the Varan Guard called Corin's Eye. Captain Sarthai, a tall avian with silver feathers, led the mission. He had fought in the Earth campaign and still wore a charm taken from a human soldier's helmet. To him, humanity was finished. "Broken animals," he called them. "They bite, yes, but not twice." He would learn how wrong he was. When Corin's Eye entered Titan's orbit, Titan Station floated quietly in the dark, half shadowed by Saturn's gold haze. The docking lights were dead. No beacons, no signals. The scanners found faint life signs, scattered weak human. Survivors, Sarthe said, narrowing his eyes. How quaint, bring us closer. The ship drifted toward the station, gliding over its cracked hull. The docking bay doors were open, torn apart from the inside. Sarthe frowned. No signs of battle. His second officer, a smaller feathered creature, spoke softly. No debris either, Captain. It's clean. That word hung heavy in the air. Clean, too clean. They docked. A boarding party entered the station, armed and armored. The lights flickered as they stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of burnt metal and oil. Stay alert, said the lieutenant. Humans like their traps. They moved through empty corridors lined with scorch marks and shredded equipment. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No hum of machines, no air vents, just the soft hiss of their breathing filters. Then, on a corridor wall, one of them saw something carved into the metal with a blade. 3 words. Keep watching above. They all looked up. Nothing, just the dark ceiling and old pipes. The lieutenant snorted. Human taunts, how primitive. He took one more step forward, and the floor opened beneath him. A figure dropped from the ceiling, wrapped in dark armor made from scavenged plates, face covered in black glass. 2 gloved hands grabbed the alien's throat before anyone could react. No sound, no hesitation. The boarding team fired, but the human was gone, melting into the shadows like smoke. The corridor lights flickered again, and in every flash they saw movement, dozens of shapes slipping through the dark. Then came the whisper through their comms, low, human calm. Welcome back to Titan. The Corin's eye lost contact 5 minutes later. When the rescue fleet arrived 12 hours after that, they found the station intact. No sign of struggle, no bodies, no wreckage. Only one thing had changed. Every wall was marked with the same symbol, 3 claw marks painted in human blood. And in the command center, carved deep into the main console, was a single sentence. You called us prey. Panic rippled through the Union. Fleet reports flooded the council from every sector near Sol. Convoys vanished. Drone squadrons went dark. Sensors recorded phantom ships moving just beyond range, only to vanish when approached. Even automated systems began malfunctioning. Every time an alien ship tried to scan Earth, their screens filled with static, and faintly, beneath the noise, human voices whispered fragments of language. Still here. Still watching. Still hunting. The Union tried to block the signals, but they came from everywhere: old satellites, abandoned stations, wrecked ships. Some were broadcasting from inside alien systems. They couldn't stop it. Inside the council chamber, fear was no longer whispered, it was shouted. Impossible, barked a reptilian general. They have no resources. They're ghosts, said another, shadows. Then tell me, growled the chancellor, why do shadows kill fleets? Ambassador Hayes, sitting chained at the edge of the room, said nothing. He only smiled. Finally, the chancellor turned to him. You know what this is, don't you? Hayes looked up, tired but amused. Yeah, it's the part you never understood. The chancellor's violet light flickered. Explain. Hayes leaned forward, his voice quiet and sure. You thought you broke us, but all you did was remove the limits. You stripped away our walls, our comfort, our hesitation. And what's left when you take everything from a predator? He smiled faintly. Instinct. The aliens thought humanity had technology. They were wrong. Humanity had will. The humans had disappeared, yes, but only from sight. Underground bunkers, forgotten moons, abandoned colonies, all alive, all working. They scavenged what the Union left behind and turned it against them. They built ships that didn't exist on any registry. They hacked into the Union's own systems, reading every order, every patrol route, every weakness. And when they were ready, they began to move. Not in armies, not in fleets. In packs. Each one silent, each one hungry. In the following weeks, strange things happened. A Union battleship arrived at Mars orbit and reported no human presence. Hours later, the same ship appeared on sensors near Jupiter, drifting, empty. A transport convoy vanished mid-jump, its signal replaced by a single human transmission. Your turn. When the message was decoded, it played a human heartbeat, slow, rhythmic, growing faster with every second until it became a drumbeat. And then silence. The Council's fear became open terror. Some wanted to flee, others demanded full extermination. But deep down, they all knew something awful. The humans weren't attacking for conquest. They weren't seeking surrender. They were teaching, showing the Union what it felt like to live in fear of the dark. Back in his cell, Ambassador Hayes lay on the cold floor, staring at the faint light leaking through the ceiling. He smiled to himself. He didn't need to see the battles to know what was happening. He could feel it. Somewhere out there, humanity had stopped running. The hunt had begun. And this time, it wasn't the humans who were prey. The council chamber no longer felt like a place of power. The same hall that once glowed with pride and control was now filled with whispers, tension, and fear. The delegates who had mocked humanity weeks ago now refused to meet each other's eyes. Holographic displays hovered above the central table, showing maps of missing fleets, ruined outposts, and blacked-out sectors near Saul. Every hour, another ship went silent. Every day, more reports came in. And every single one carried the same mark, 3 claw-like slashes carved into metal, always deep enough to cut through armor. The mark of humans. The High Chancellor's crystal form dimmed as it addressed the panicked crowd. Its voice, once proud and calm, now carried cracks. This chaos cannot continue. The human insurgency must be. Insurgency, interrupted a reptilian general, his voice trembling. This isn't insurgency. Whole fleets are disappearing. They don't fight head-on anymore. They appear, strike, and vanish. They're hunting us. They are scavengers, another council member insisted. Cowards using tricks. The reptilian slammed a clawed hand against the table. Tricks. One of our dreadnoughts was found split in half. Its reactor was removed, its crew gone. Do you think Tricks can do that? The chamber erupted into shouting. Fear spread like fire. And then from the corner of the room, a calm voice cut through it all. Of course they can. The noise stopped instantly. All eyes turned toward Ambassador Hayes. He was still chained, still bruised, but somehow looked alive. A quiet, dangerous light burned behind his eyes. You talk like this is new, he said, but you just don't get it. You were warned. The Chancellor's violet light flickered. You speak boldly for a prisoner. Hayes gave a small, humorless smile. I'm not bold, I'm just human. The Chancellor leaned forward, crystals scraping softly. Then explain. Explain how your scattered people, your broken fleets can do this. Hayes looked around the room slowly. You think because you crushed our armies we stopped fighting, but humans don't stop, we change. He stood as far as his chains allowed. You studied our history, right? You saw our wars, our empires, our fallings and risings. What you never understood is that we were never built for peace. We were built to survive anything. He looked the Chancellor in the eye. You took everything from us, our cities, our skis, our hope, and you thought that made us weak. He shook his head slowly. You just made us pure. An Insecto delegate hissed. You are savages. Hayes smiled faintly. You keep saying that like it's an insult. He tugged slightly at his chains. You don't know what happens when a human loses everything. We don't surrender, we focus. We learn. And when the pain stops, something else wakes up. The Chancellor's glow dimmed. You mean your so-called hunter mode? Hayes' expression darkened. I see you've heard the name. Outside the chamber, chaos spread through the Union's communications network. Holographic feeds flickered with static. One by one, screens across the building began showing strange human symbols, ancient warning signs, red and jagged. The technicians panicked. "They're inside our systems," one cried. "There." Before he could finish, the screens all turned black. Then came a sound. A slow heartbeat. Thump thump. The aliens froze as the sound filled the chamber, echoing off every wall. Hayes smiled grimly. "That's not a signal," he said softly. "That's a countdown." Minutes later, the chamber lights flickered again. A projection formed in the air, a live feed from one of the Union's main shipyards orbiting Varnies. The Council watched in horror as shadows moved across the massive structure. Then, without warning, the station's reactors exploded. A silent flash of light filled the feed, followed by debris and spinning wreckage. The feed cut out. Silence fell again. One delegate whispered, "That was one of our largest yards." Hayes looked up, voice calm. "We built it, didn't we? Humans helped you design those reactors years ago. You should have known we'd remember how to break them." The Chancellor rose to its full height, glowing with anger and fear. "You will tell us how to stop this, human, or I will have you torn apart." Hayes met its gaze without flinching. "You can't stop it." "Why not?" the Chancellor hissed. "Because you're fighting soldiers," Hayes said quietly. "But we stopped being soldiers a long time ago." He leaned forward, chains creaking. "You're fighting survivors, people who buried their children and still kept walking. You can't scare us anymore." Another explosion rocked the planet. This one closer, an orbital platform. The chamber lights flashed red as alarms began to wail. "Multiple detonations," shouted a guard. "They've breached the defense grid." The Chancellor's glow fractured, pieces of crystal flickering. "How? Our security is absolute." Hayes tilted his head. "You forget who built your encryption, who worked in your factories, who cleaned your systems while you looked down on them." He smiled coldly. "You gave us access to everything." For the first time in centuries, the Council, the masters of half the galaxy, looked truly afraid. One delegate whispered, "What do they want?" Hayes' eyes softened. His voice was low, almost sad. "Not peace, not power, just to make you feel what we felt." He looked around at the trembling faces. "You called us beasts, you called us monsters. Maybe you were right." He pulled against his chains again. They groaned but didn't break. "But now you get to meet your monsters in the dark." Outside, the night sky above Varnies burned with streaks of light, dozens of objects entering the atmosphere. The sensors screamed warnings. "Missiles." No, not missiles. Each one was small, irregular. The scanners couldn't identify them. Then, as the first fell near the capital, cameras zoomed in. They weren't bombs, they were escape pods. Hundreds of them. And each one carried a single human. Inside his cell, Hayes finally smiled for real. He could feel it, the air changing, the fear spreading. The hunt had reached the heart of the galaxy. And the Council, for all its power, was about to learn the one truth every human child knew deep down. Never corner a species that learned to survive its own extinction. The night sky above Varnies burned. At first, the Council thought the objects raining through the atmosphere were debris, fallen satellites, wreckage from the destroyed shipyard. But when the scanners came back online, the readings froze the blood of every creature in the room. They weren't bombs, they weren't drones. They were humans. Hundreds of human drop pods fell from orbit, silent as ghosts. No transmissions, no distress calls. Each one hit the ground like a hammer from heaven, cutting deep craters into the alien capital. The ground shook. The lights in the Council chamber flickered again. The Chancellor's voice trembled for the first time. "Deploy all guards, contain them before." Before it could finish, a sharp voice echoed from the comms channel. "Too late." The first attack came without warning. At the Eastern Defense Tower, guards saw figures moving through the smoke, small, fast, their armor black and rough, made from scavenged alien tech. Their movements were too smooth, too focused. No hesitation, no chatter. The aliens fired plasma rounds, lighting the sky in blue streaks, but the humans didn't retreat. They kept coming. One soldier, a Varan officer, shouted, "They're not fighting like before." He was right. They weren't charging in anger. They were hunting. They moved in pairs, flanking, striking from shadows, vanishing before reinforcements arrived. They didn't yell or scream. They fought in silence, their faces hidden behind black visors. Every shot counted. Every movement was purpose. Within 15 minutes, the tower fell silent. The last transmission the Council received was a whisper through static. "Target down, moving to next." The Council tried to coordinate defenses, but their communication grids were failing. Systems overloaded. Cameras turned to static. Automated turrets fired on empty air. In the confusion, the alien leaders realized a horrible truth. Humans had learned how to use their own technology better than they did. The creatures who were once called primitive were now turning the galaxy's most advanced tools into weapons of terror. In the control bunker beneath the Council chamber, technicians worked frantically. "They've hijacked the orbital sensors," one shouted. "We can't see where they are." Another yelled, "Power surge on the northern grid. Wait, that's not a surge, it's—" The bunker lights went out. In the dark, faint human laughter echoed through the comms. It wasn't cruel or mocking, it was quiet, cold, confident. Then the screens flickered to life again. Every monitor showed the same thing: a human face covered in soot and blood, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You should have left us alone." The feed cut. The Chancellor stood trembling in the chamber above, staring at the chaos below the city through the glass floor. Fires burned across the skyline. "This is madness," it whispered. "They cannot win." Hayes, still in chains beside the guards, looked up at it calmly. "You don't get it," he said. "They're not here to win. They're here to show you what fear feels like." The Chancellor turned sharply toward him. "You are proud of this." Hayes didn't answer. He just looked toward the burning horizon. "You made this, all of it." Down below, the humans advanced with ruthless precision. They didn't attack civilians. They avoided crowded districts. Their targets were always military, communication hubs, power stations, transport relays. Every strike was fast, surgical, like a knife through flesh. They disabled weapons, not for mercy, but for message. One alien commander, trapped in a damaged base, sent out a desperate transmission. "They could have killed us. They didn't. They just looked at us, those eyes, then walked away. Why?" The Council didn't answer. None of them could. They didn't understand what was happening, but Hayes did. Humans weren't trying to destroy the Union. They were dismantling its illusion of control. Hours later, the attack stopped. The fires still burned, but the fighting was over. The city was silent except for distant sirens. Then, through the smoke and ash, a shape rose above the horizon. A massive ship entering low orbit, patched together from dozens of wrecked vessels. Its hull was jagged, black, scarred. But across its side, painted in white, were two words that made the aliens shiver: Retribution Class. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. The Council scrambled to contact their fleets. None responded. Every ship in orbit had gone silent. Then, from the Retribution's bridge, a transmission opened across every frequency in the system. A human voice spoke, steady, calm, unshaken. "You wanted peace through control. We wanted peace through freedom. You called us beasts. You should have remembered what beasts do when cornered." A pause. The sound of metal creaking filled the air. "We learned from you. We built from your wrecks. We adapted. You taught us how to hunt. Now we're the better hunters." In the chamber, the Chancellor collapsed into its seat, light flickering weakly. What "What do you want from us?" it whispered. Hayes, still chained but smiling, looked up. "We want nothing. You've already given us what we needed." The Chancellor glared. "And what is that?" Hayes met its gaze. "A reason." Outside, the Retribution fired, not on the city but into orbit. Its cannons struck the Council's shipyards, annihilating their fleets in minutes. Explosions filled the night sky, bright as a new dawn. When the light faded, the voice returned. "We could have destroyed your world, but we didn't. Remember that, Mercy. It's the last you'll get." Then the human fleets disappeared, just as silently as they had come. Hours later, as fires smoldered and smoke covered the capital, the council sat in silence. No one spoke. No one dared. Humanity had not conquered. They had not demanded tribute or territory. They had simply shown them. The galaxy now knew what it meant to make humans bleed. In his cell, Hayes finally sat down, exhausted. He whispered softly to himself, as if speaking to ghosts. "We don't start wars," he said, "but we always finish them." He smiled faintly, the light of the burning skyline reflecting in his tired eyes. Above him, the human fleet vanished into the stars, predators returning to the dark, leaving their prey trembling behind. And for the first time in its history, the great Galactic Union felt something it had never known before. Fear. Real primal fear. The morning after the attack on Varnes was quiet, too quiet. The smoke still curled above the capital's broken towers. Streets that once shimmered with light were covered in ash and silence. The great council chamber, once filled with pride and arrogance, now reeked of fear. No one had slept, no one dared to. The alien world, once the center of a proud galactic empire, now looked like a battlefield. And hanging high above it all, like a ghost that refused to leave, was the Retribution. A massive human ship, a monster built from wreckage and rage. It didn't move, it didn't fire. It simply waited, silent and terrible, casting its shadow across the planet below. The galaxy held its breath. Inside the council chamber, the surviving delegates sat in stunned silence. No speeches, no orders, just trembling voices and the hum of damaged machinery. The Chancellor, its crystal body cracked from the earlier blasts, stood in the center of the room. "They are waiting for us," it whispered. "They want us to answer." Answer what? No one knew. On the far side of the chamber, a low beep cut through the quiet. A transmission request from the Retribution. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the Chancellor nodded to the technicians. "Accept it." The holographic display flickered, static, then light. And there he was. Ambassador Hayes. Not in chains, not in a cell. He stood tall on the bridge of the Retribution, his uniform torn but his eyes sharp and alive. Behind him, human officers moved with silent precision, faces calm but hardened. The room went dead silent. The Chancellor's voice wavered. You were freed." Hayes smiled faintly. "No, I was retrieved." He stepped closer to the camera. "You called this a containment. You called us savages, animals, monsters." He paused, his voice calm but heavy. "Maybe you were right, but you made us this way." He gestured behind him to the massive ship. "This is your technology, your engines, your weapons. You built the tools that broke your own empire. We just learned faster than you." The Chancellor trembled, its glow dimming. "What do you want, human? Vengeance? War?" Hayes shook his head. "We already had war. You wanted to cage us, control us, erase us. You failed. Now we want something simpler." He leaned forward, voice dropping low. "We want you to remember." The chamber lights flickered again as Hayes spoke. "When the Union came to Earth, you said you wanted peace. You said you were bringing light to a savage world. But your peace was slavery. Your light burned our cities." He paused, the air thick with tension. "You didn't destroy us. You woke something up, the part of us that survives when everything else dies." The Chancellor clenched its crystalline hands. "You are threatening the entire galaxy." Hayes smiled, but there was no joy in it. "No, we're teaching it." He raised his hand, and the transmission expanded to show the Retribution's weapon systems powering up. Dozens of energy cannons locked onto the orbital shipyard still floating in ruins. "You called yourselves gods," he said softly. "Let's see how gods bleed." A beam of white light shot from the Retribution, slicing through the blackness of space. The nearest shipyard exploded instantly, no fire, just a silent burst of light and dust. Then another, and another. The sky above Varnes turned into a storm of falling stars. The council screamed orders, but it was useless. Hayes watched quietly as the destruction unfolded. After the last explosion faded, he turned back to the Chancellor. His voice was steady. "You see what we could do? That was restraint, that was mercy." He leaned forward. "We could have leveled your cities, we could have ended your species, but we didn't." He looked around the chamber, as if staring into every alien eye, watching the feed across the galaxy. "This isn't conquest," he said. "This is the lesson you paid for in blood. Don't mistake our silence again. We tried peace. You gave us war. Now we know how to win both." The Chancellor struggled to speak. "You will bring fear and chaos to the stars." Hayes' face hardened. "Good. Maybe a little fear will remind the galaxy to think before it crowns itself master of others." He stepped back and folded his hands behind him. "From this day forward, Earth is not your colony, not your protectorate, not your mistake." He took a breath. "We are the balance now, the ones who remember what it's like to fight in the dark and rise again." The transmission ended. The hologram vanished, leaving the council staring at the empty air. For a long moment no one spoke. Then outside the chamber alarms sounded again. The Retribution was leaving orbit, engines glowing like dying stars. It didn't fire again. It didn't send another message. It just rose higher and higher, disappearing into the black, leaving behind a world that would never sleep soundly again. Later that night, on the scorched surface of Varnes, a young alien soldier sat among the ruins. The sky still glowed faintly with smoke. In the distance, he could see the wreckage of the shipyards falling like burning rain. He whispered quietly to himself, "They spared us." An older officer nearby shook his head. "No, they marked us." The younger one frowned. "For what?" The officer looked toward the stars. "For the day we forget again." Far beyond the Union's borders, the Retribution drifted through the void. Inside, humanity's surviving commanders gathered around Hayes. He stood in silence, looking out at the stars. "Do you think they'll try again?" one officer asked. Hayes didn't turn. "They always do." "And what will we do when they come?" He smiled faintly, his reflection shimmering in the glass. "What we always do: adapt, endure, hunt." The stars burned cold and distant beyond the window. Somewhere, 1,000 new suns waited. Hayes whispered almost to himself, "We're done surviving." He turned away from the stars, eyes hard and steady. "Now," he said, "we build." The stars had never seemed so quiet. Weeks passed since the Retribution vanished into the dark. The Council world, once the heart of the Galactic Union, still burned under its own smoke. The sky was filled with drifting wreckage, glowing metal ghosts of what had been the greatest fleet in known space. The proud species of the galaxy did not celebrate their survival. They hid. The Union's communications channels, once filled with orders and trade deals, were now whisper networks of fear. Every ship captain, every general, every governor asked the same question. Where are the humans now? No one had an answer. In the ruins of Varnes, the council met one final time. There were fewer of them now. The chamber once filled with hundreds of voices was now nearly empty. Half the seats were broken, the rest covered in dust and ash. The Chancellor sat at the center, its light dim and flickering. Its once brilliant crystalline body was cracked from stress and battle tremors. "They spared us," whispered a thin insectoid delegate. "We should be grateful." "Grateful," another spat. "They humiliated us, they shattered our fleets." The Chancellor raised a hand, silencing them. "They could have shattered us." A long silence followed. Every delegate there had seen the recordings, humans walking through the fires of their capital, ignoring civilians, striking only at command centers, power grids, and defense networks. Precision, not chaos. Purpose, not revenge. "They didn't kill us because they wanted something worse than death," said the Chancellor softly. "They wanted us to remember." Across the galaxy, remembrance took root. On desert moons, children of alien miners whispered human stories in the dark, about warriors made of steel and sorrow, who came from a blue world and fought gods with broken ships. On cold space stations, soldiers cleaned their weapons twice before sleeping, afraid of waking to a heartbeat in the comms. And in the halls of power, the phrase spread like wildfire. "Never corner a human." It became a warning, a proverb, a prayer. Meanwhile, far from the chaos, humanity began to rebuild. Deep beneath the ruins of Earth's old cities, new forges burned again. The planet that had once been silent now hummed with life, slow, steady, determined. The survivors worked without rest. They salvaged what was left of alien wrecks, recycled their metals, learned their languages, and improved their designs. The scars of war were everywhere. Shattered skyscrapers, oceans turned gray, continents burned black. But humanity had seen worse. They had crawled out of ice ages and ashes before. This was just another beginning. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Hayes watched the sun rise over Earth's horizon. The light broke through the gray clouds, touching the surface with pale gold. For the first time in years, the world looked alive again. Behind him, Commander Rivera approached quietly. "Reconstruction units have reported progress in the Atlantic zone," she said. "We're months ahead of schedule." Hayes nodded but didn't turn. "Good." "They're asking what we'll do next," she said carefully. "The people, the survivors, they want to know if we'll return to the stars." Hayes' reflection in the glass showed a tired man, older than his years. "We will," he said softly, "but not for war." She frowned. "Then for what?" He looked down at the glowing curve of the planet. "To make sure it never happens again." Far from Earth, across 1,000 alien systems, humanity had become something new in the minds of all who spoke their name. To some, they were monsters, cold, relentless predators who had turned fear into a weapon. To others, they were heroes, survivors who refused to bow to tyranny, even when facing extinction. But to all, they were a warning. A reminder that power built on cruelty will one day face the hunted, and the hunted will always remember. Back on Varnes, the Chancellor stood alone on a balcony overlooking the broken city. The smoke had thinned, and the stars were visible again. For the first time, it looked at them not as rulers, but as prey who had learned humility. In the distance, one star shone brighter than the rest, the Sol system, faint but distinct. The Chancellor whispered quietly, almost to itself, "You could have destroyed us. Why didn't you?" A voice answered from behind. It was the insectoid delegate, the only one brave enough to speak freely now. "Because," it said, "they wanted us to live with the memory. Death ends fear. Memory keeps it alive." The Chancellor said nothing. Its cracked hand tightened around the railing. "Then we will remember." Years later, when the Galactic Union tried to reform, there was an empty chair in every council chamber, a black steel seat left untouched. It wasn't ceremonial, it wasn't decorative. It was reserved. Every decision, every vote, every debate began with a glance at that empty chair. It stood as a reminder that there were eyes out there, watching from the dark, waiting to see if the galaxy had learned its lesson. They called it the human seat. and it remained empty always. On Earth, Hayes sat in a rebuilt command center surrounded by young recruits, the next generation, kids who hadn't seen the war but grew up hearing the stories. One asked him quietly, "Sir, is it true that the council begged for mercy?" Hayes smiled faintly. "Maybe, but that's not the part that matters." "What matters then?" He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window where the new dawn touched the rebuilt skyline. "What matters," he said softly, "is that they'll never try it again." He stood, his gaze steady and proud. "We survived the dark, we became the dark, and we found our light again." He turned toward his officers, his voice stronger now. "Humanity isn't the prey anymore. We're the warning that hunts." Somewhere in the far reaches of the void, the Retribution drifted quietly, engines cold, systems silent. No signal, no beacon, only a faint inscription etched across its hull, visible when the light of a distant sun touched it just right. "We remember." The galaxy had changed forever. And in the vast silence of the stars, one truth echoed through every world that still dared to dream of conquest. Never corner a human.